Alright, back again, this time for my ultimate fan-made projects video so far. Mods, conversions, ground-up original creations, they're all here. But to avoid issues, I'm gonna lump everything together here by addressing them all as simply fan projects. But I'll make sure to label everything more accurately on screen. These are passion projects where fans spend countless hours creating new works, usually without financial incentive. And honestly, some of these are even better than official releases. This is a niche world of games, not known by most players, and because of their nature, you usually have to dig for them. That said, I'm going to be going over more than 50 of them here, so hopefully you'll find something that sparks your interest. And in this episode, I'm going to go over a few of the heavy hitters that are really highly requested that I touch on. This being a mega video, I'll start off by talking about a bunch of new stuff that I'm talking about here for the very first time. And then after that, I'll transition to the stuff that I've already covered in the past for new viewers. Alright, and now that that's out of the way, let's get this thing rolling. First up is Super Mario Bros. CD, a really special approach to this sort of SNES project. In short, it basically springs from a cool what-if idea. What if Nintendo released a CD-ROM add-on for the original NES or Famicom back in the day? Built on the Super Mario World engine, it imagines a Mario game for that fictional hardware, somewhat in a similar vein to what Sonic CD was able to do thanks to the Sega CD. Its presentation is immediately noticeable as just slightly pushing things past what we saw in the NES. The team behind this project uses the SNES's Graphics Mode 0 extensively to allow for 4 background layers, which, used in a smart way, can create a lot of depth and parallax scrolling. And the result is a visual style that's meant to look like an enhanced 8-bit game. But that look, paired with the CD-style audio using the MSU1 enhancements, enable an original soundtrack with a time-appropriate city pop feel. And while there's nothing in the demo just yet for this, I know that past MSU1 projects had the possibility of putting in fully animated cutscenes. All that said, the core gameplay is the 2D platforming that you know and love from Mario. This one still is a work in progress, with the goal of including over 40 different interconnected levels, but what's here already is enough to appreciate to see what the Famicom CD team is going for. It's a clever use of newer developments for the SNES that simulate a game and a piece of hardware that's a fun what-if, which I think creates something super distinct within the Mario fan game community. Next up is another Mario project, but this time it's for Super Mario Sunshine on the GameCube, called Super Mario Eclipse. This is one that came out in August 2024 after a 4-year-long wait, and it's one of the most impressive GameCube fan projects of this kind that I've seen. It's a massive expansion built on the 2002 original that adds basically an entire new game's worth of content, with 120 new stars, while also ironing out some of the rough edges of the original. As for the new stuff, there are a bunch of new levels and a ton of little tweaks to the gameplay. You're also not just stuck playing as Mario, because you can unlock Luigi and Il Piantissimo that each have their own gameplay feel. The nice quality of life changes here are also super appreciated, like removing the need to leave the level after finding a shine, which allows you to feel much more present in each environment. The structure also shifts towards a more interconnected Isle Delfino, letting you find paths between each of the areas. It also packs in new enemies and boss fights, so for Mario Sunshine fans looking for more content and some nice tweaks, this is a massive undertaking worth checking out.
Super Mario Eclipse!
Here's a cool one from the Doom modding scene, Doom: The Golden Souls 3. Being developed by Bat Andy, it isn't just new maps, it's a total conversion of Doom 2 running in GZ Doom that takes Doom's first-person shooting and it mashes it with a collectathon platformer straight off the N64, like Mario 64 or Banjo-Kazooie. The structure shifts away from the typical Doom key hunt linearity. You start in a hub world that connects to these big, colorful sandbox levels. and your main goal is to be collecting these golden souls, which act like power stars or Jiggies, by completing quests and objectives within these stages. You'll also be hunting down secondary items like the Slayer coins, which are similar to Mario's red coins. But the biggest change is how Doom Guy moves here. He gets new abilities like ledge climbing, wall jumping, and a long jump. And as you can imagine, this completely changes the feel away from the typical Doom-style movement. It's built for traversing open levels filled with secrets, but of course, you're still shooting demons while you're bounding around. Visually, this mod goes for bright and playful with N64-inspired graphics, which is a fun thing to see in the Doom engine. And yeah, since this is the third in a series, there are the previous two available to fool around with, but I think that playing 3 is so much of an improvement on those that this is the one worth trying out and keeping an eye on. Alright, finally, it's time for me to check out a proper Pokemon fan project called Pokemon Fool's Gold. It's built on top of Pokemon Crystal for the Game Boy Color, the Pokemon game that I personally have a ton of nostalgia for, so expect that classic Gen 2 look and feel. But the hook here is pretty ambitious. The creator, Celadonk, took all 251 original Pokemon and completely redid them. So forget what you know about Charmander or Pidgey. In this hack, every single creature has a new alt-universe take, with the new typing and different moves. Think of them as regional fakes, like finding a Clefairy that's now a fire type. You still journey through the familiar Johto region collecting badges and heading to the Pokemon League followed by Kanto, but because every Pokemon is different, it's a fun twist on a familiar game. You'll need to figure out the new type matchups and what each redesigned Pokemon can do. It also added some nice quality of life changes like the physical special split from the newer games and TMs that you can reuse. And with one of the later post-release updates, they even tacked on a whole new post-game area, the Sevi Islands, which are populated with even more redesigned Pokemon from Gen 3. Some designs here are clever reinterpretations, while others might look a bit strange, but the effort is obviously here. If you like the structure of the old Pokemon games, but you want a fresh set of creatures to find and train, Fool's Gold is definitely worth looking into. It makes Johto feel like something that's really a new thing to discover yet again. Next up is a fan game from the Mega Man community called Mega Man Quints Revenge. This one picks up where the story left off for Quint. You know, the character that everyone loves and knows? Okay, but obviously not. Now, if you've never played Mega Man 2 on the Game Boy, it's really easy not to have that name spark any recognition. But in that game, Dr. Wily grabbed a version from Mega Man from the future, brainwashed him, and gave him a weird pogo stick to go up against the proper Mega Man that we all know and love. In that game, he just teleports away after being beaten and is never heard from again. But in this fan game, it reimagines what happens next for him. So after Dr. Wily ditches him out of disappointment, Quint breaks free from the programming and decides that it's payback time against the doctor who pulled him from his time. So this is a ground-up creation for the PC that's aiming for that classic 8-bit Mega Man feel. And you play as Quint, who's going through these stages inspired by Mega Man 2 and 3 on the NES. But he doesn't exactly play like traditional Mega Man. He gets some new moves from the later games, like a dash, longer jumps, and the ability to duck. It makes the action feel way faster and adds different ways to get through the levels. And if this all sounds way too different for you, don't worry, it's still the robot masters getting defeated like Woodman or Needleman, and you get their weapons, sticking to the core formula. Visually, it looks just like an NES game, and the creator even went through the effort of remixing the Game Boy's music for this more plussed-up release. So if you're into classic Mega Man and you want to see an obscure character get his own adventure, check out Quint's Revenge. Now onto two fan-made standouts, Castlevania The Lecarde Chronicles 1 and 2 made by Megami Games for the PC. The first entry was released back in 2013, and it throws you straight back into that classic-style Castlevania mold. You play as Efrain Lecarde, a knight who's connected to Eric from Bloodlines, who's fighting evil across 18th century France. So expect a mix of classic Castlevania ideas, with platforming sections, challenging bosses, and the familiar sub-weapons. That said, it also does pull from the Simon's Quest mold a bit, with a town to explore with NPCs to help and guide you on your adventure. And then in 2017, the second game came out, and it changes the approach up quite a bit. The sequel draws even more inspiration from Simon's Quest, but it also dips its toes into stuff from like Symphony of the Night, where it's a much more open map design that's about you carving your own path. Getting stronger here means finding items hidden throughout the world, health and heart upgrades, better weapons and armor, and special relics that act as keys to gain access to new locations. This design choice makes hunting down secrets feel a lot more necessary. There's even a day and night cycle that changes the state of towns that brings out the tougher enemies after dark. The amount of love that went into this series, especially Lecarde Chronicles 2, is stunning. They even go as far as to get Robert Belgrade back to voice Alucard. So for anyone missing that classic style Castlevania, these are definitely worth finding, especially the second one. Next up is a game that I get a ton of requests for, and I'm finally going to do it here. ZIAOL. ZIIAOL? What really matters is that it's a remaster for the PC of Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link. And that said, remaster is selling it a bit short. The developer Hoverbat took the original game's code and translated it into GameMaker, allowing for more extrapolation on what was already there. So this means that the game really does feel and look just like Zelda 2. The way Link moves, the timing in the combat, how enemies act, it's all faithfully close to the 1987 classic. But they also went in and tweaked things, adding a bunch of new helpful features like smoothing out some of the rough spots that made the original game so notoriously tough. First off, it supports widescreen displays natively and has smooth scrolling, which is a really nice, super clean, crisp way to play through this game. There's also an in-game map that fills out as you explore dungeons, and the heads-up display has more useful information on hand, like your current spell and key count. You also only lose some of your XP towards your next level when you get a game over, so it's not as punishing. The dialogue also moves faster, and dying in the dungeon sends you back to the entrance instead of far away. So the tweaks that Hoverbat did here are really appreciated. It's a refreshing take that keeps the core challenge, but removes a lot of the early game design frustration. So if the original Zelda 2 put you off, this might be a version that clicks with you. Oh, and there's a randomizer also built in, so if you want an extra challenge, you can check out those options as well. Next up is a fan project that's made huge waves, and that is Undertale Yellow. Developed over 7 years, it dropped for free on PC in late 2023. But this isn't just some mod, it's a full-blown prequel to Undertale, even going as far as building it in the same engine. You play as Clover, a kid with a yellow soul, with a mission to head down into the underground before Frisk does, to find out what happened to the 5 human kids who disappeared there earlier. You can't really find any other original Undertale fan game that will be so official feeling. There's a ton of effort and work put into this, especially with the new monsters that take on the different turn-based bullet hell battles that you know and love, but do it in their own new ways. And for the most part, it's pretty faithful to the original Undertale, but that said, it also does a few of its own unique things. Like, Clover uses a toy gun, so when you issue a fight command, it involves timing shots on your targets. And while you will see familiar locations like Snowdin again, Clover's journey takes you through new spots too, like the Western-themed dunes or the mechanical steamworks. There's a whole cast of new characters like the Guard Marlet, Sheriff Starlo, and the oddly complex Cereba. Flowey also appears acting as a guide and handling your saves. The pixel art is as sharp as ever, and the animations look really nice and smooth, paired with the fantastic original yet controversial soundtrack here. Google it. It's just really satisfying. It is often tougher than the original game, but with handy additions like running and immediate boss retires, it smooths out some of that stuff too. So for anyone who loves Undertale, this fan creation is absolutely worth checking out. Okay, while I'm knocking out some of the biggest fan projects, it's time to finally talk about AM2R, another Metroid 2 remake. It's a ground-up reimagining of Metroid 2 Return of Samus for the Game Boy, The main idea, though, was to take the old black and white adventure and give it a new look that feels more like the later Metroid games, specifically pulling from Super Metroid and Metroid Zero Mission. It originally came out for PC back in 2016, and it was the core of one of the biggest firestorms around Nintendo using legal threats to protect its own IP. Which is a lot to unpack, so I'm not really going to get into that here. I'll just recommend you go check out the Geek Critiques video on AM2R, where they go more in depth and are way more thorough on a game and go into some of the history on that end. But as for the game itself, it changed a lot for the better. Samus controls way better, feeling way more closer to how she does on the SNES or the GBA. She also gets abilities like better aiming, wedge grabs, wall jumping, and the speed booster that make it feel much more in line with the other games in the series. But most importantly, gone is the guesswork of the original Game Boy game. AM2R adds a auto-map system, just like my favorite Metroid game, Zero Mission. There's even a logbook that adds bits of story about the planet SR388, the Chozo, and the creatures you find. Visually, it swaps the Game Boy's simple look for colorful, detailed pixel art that is a huge improvement. Though, that said, every once in a while there's an effect that looks just un-Nintendo enough to signal in the back of your mind that this is indeed a fan project. But regardless, it looks good when you're not trying to nitpick it like that. The sound also got a major upgrade too, with a full musical score that builds the atmosphere that every Metroid fan would want. While the straightforward goal is still hunting down all the Metroids to open up the deeper parts of the planet, the journey is different. The map is bigger with new zones, secrets, and even some new bosses beyond the Metroids themselves. It's a wildly polished reimagining that's gotten so many different branches that separate and fan projects built on top of it that it's kind of arguable within the Metroid community if it's an unofficial, official Metroid canon kind of game, if you know what I mean. It's part of the fan base's core, set of games, if you get what I'm saying. So definitely check that one out if you are a Metroid fan like myself. First up is The Legend of Zelda: The Missing Link, a Zelda fan project by ZIIAOL. It aims to bridge the narrative gap between Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, and it offers a completely new, albeit short, adventure built within the Ocarina of Time engine. It also features a slightly darker, more atmospheric tone with unsettling music that provides the perfect little segue into the more sinister vibes of Majora's Mask. So if you're a fan of Zelda on the N64, I think you'd probably enjoy this one as a quick standalone treat. Next is Sonic and the Fallen Star, a Sonic the Hedgehog fan game by Team Stardrop, and it's a full-ass new Sonic game. 9 completely new zones, amazing original art, and a shockingly excellent soundtrack. As things go for fan games, this is one that can easily stand right next to the official releases. The production values here, especially the detailed stages and the expressive character sprites, and even the cutscenes, are just top-tier work. The amount of content here and the quality of it makes it stand out in a sea of lesser Sonic fan projects. So if you want another great Sonic game and haven't given this one a shot yet, you're missing out. Then we have Mother Cognitive Dissonance, a fan-made Earthbound RPG that tells the backstory of Geeg and his transformation into Gigas, connecting Earthbound Beginnings and Earthbound. It's got its own story, exploring a part of the Mother universe that we haven't seen before, and the party is pretty wild here with familiar enemies and even Mr. Saturn. And the fact that you can travel to different planets and there are multiple endings depending on what you do is just a really cool touch. So if you're a die-hard Earthbound fan, especially if you're into fanon, you'll probably dig this. Then we have Streets of Rage Remake, which is a Streets of Rage fan game by Bomberman. It's an incredibly polished remake of the Genesis Streets of Rage trilogy for PC, and it's awesome because it doesn't really just recreate the original 3 games, it throws in a ton of new stuff, like extra characters, enemies, levels, and game modes. Plus it's got a remixed soundtrack, and they even put some of the stuff that was cut from the original games back in, like the motorcycle stages from Streets of Rage 3. So if you're an SOR fan, or just like beat 'em up games, you'll probably love this. It's easily one of the best made fan games using the open bore engine. Moving on to Final Fantasy Renaissance, a Final Fantasy remake by Renaissance Games. What's cool about this one is that it's both a straight-up recreation of the original and a Renaissance mode, with 10 brand new classes and tons of tweaks to make everything feel totally plussed up. Like for example, they added nice quality of life stuff like showing which items you can equip and auto-targeting. If you're a Final Fantasy fan, especially the first games on the NES, you'd really get a kick out of this one. Banjo-Kazooie Jiggies of Time is a Banjo-Kazooie fan project by the prolific Mark Kirko, and I'm sure I'll be talking about more stuff from him in the future of this series. But this one's a full game that mixes Banjo-Kazooie with the Ocarina of Time. It turns Banjo-Kazooie's world into Ocarina of Time locations, with Zelda-themed looks for everyone and everything. It also adds a bunch of gameplay tweaks, remixed music from the Zelda games, and new challenges that use Banjo and Kazooie's moves in cool Hyrulean ways. If you're a fan of either Banjo-Kazooie or Ocarina of Time, or just like 3D platformers, this one's for you. Man No Constancy is a really popular Mega Man 2 fan project by Ica. It totally overhauls Mega Man 2 for the NES, changing practically everything about it. It's got a whole new soundtrack, completely redesigned levels, and new sprites, so it feels totally different than Mega Man 2. The Robot Masters may look familiar here, but their themes and how they act and what their weapons do are totally different. And it's even tougher than ever, so if you're a Mega Man 2 pro and are looking for a real challenge, or if you just like new takes on beloved classics, you should check this one out. Sonic MegaMix is a Sonic the Hedgehog fan project that is a heavily modified version of the original Sonic the Hedgehog with Sega CD enhancements. It's a total reimagining of the original Sonic, with new playable characters like Shadow and added moves like the Spin Dash and Air Dash and completely redesigned levels. So if you've already checked out Sonic and the Fallen Star and need another fix of the blue blur, or just want a game with more of a feel for the classic style Genesis games, check this one out. Golden Axe Returns is a Golden Axe fan game by ZIIAOL. It's a fan-made sequel built in the open bore engine, set between Golden Axe 3 and Revenge of Death Adder. It's cool because it builds on the classic Golden Axe gameplay by adding cool new features like throwable weapons and special attacks. It also boasts a huge roster of characters from across the Golden Axe series, remixed music, and 4-player widescreen co-op. So this is another one that if you love Genesis-era beat-em-ups, you'll probably love this. Waluigi's Taco Stand is another fan project from ZIIAOL, and in this one, you play as Waluigi, who has to run a taco stand to pay his rent after he gambles all of his and Wario's money away. It's actually inspired by a fanfic that is over 500 pages long, but don't worry, you don't need to engage with any of that. It's just a silly game where you take taco orders and then have to go run around grabbing ingredients to make those tacos. It's a rare chance to play as Waluigi, and the whole taco stand thing just oddly fits his whole weird vibe. So if you want an offbeat take on Mario 64, you'd get a kick out of this. Next up is Super Metroid Ascent, a Super Metroid fan project from Beanox50. It's a total redesign focused on exploring and solving puzzles. And it's awesome because it also looks and sounds incredible, with updated graphics, cool parallax effects, and a custom soundtrack. And the way that it's designed is that you can't go back to earlier areas in some cases, which is a pretty unique decision and sets it apart from a lot of other Metroid fan projects. So if you're a Super Metroid fan who's looking for a new challenge or just love exploring games, you'll probably dig this one. Just make sure you master the wall jump first. Power Bomberman is a Bomberman fan game that is really polished, but it's a straightforward take on the series. But the main thing here is that it's got online multiplayer and a bunch of different game modes. It's just loaded with tons of stuff: stages, abilities, power-ups, characters, all from the classic Bomberman games, but with tons of ways to customize. But ultimately boiled down, this is just a straightforward, simple take on classic Bomberman, just delivered in a really polished way. If you want a new online party game to play with a bunch of friends on Discord, you'll probably have a blast with this one. Abobos Big Adventure is a classic Flash game, but I bet there's a ton of younger folks who have never even heard of it. It's an 8-bit parody game where you play as Abobo, the bruiser enemy from Double Dragon, who's trying to rescue his son, Aboboy, by going through levels that make fun of classic NES games. Yeah, the retro game memberberry humor is pretty tired now, but this game is one of the few things from that era of internet humor that I think is pretty solid still. The fact that each stage parodies a different NES game makes the gameplay really varied, and the fan service stuff kind of works here because it's done with such an understanding of what they're poking fun at. It's definitely dumb and over-the-top violent, but hey, it's a Newgrounds game. If you're into classic NES games, you'll probably have some fun with it. Then we have Super Surfing Pikachu DX, a simple Pokemon fan game by Cosmic Hierophant. It's inspired by the surfing minigame from Pokemon Yellow, but it takes that nostalgic Pokemon minigame and updates it with newer Pokemon, turning it into basically a side-scrolling shooter where you're dodging everything. This one's not huge or super ambitious, but I just think it's a really neat little oddity. So if you have a lot of nostalgia for that minigame and want to see a new, plussed-up take on it, you gotta check this one out for at least a minute. And finally, we've got Pokerogue, a browser-based Pokemon roguelike, and it's all about the battles here, no overworld exploring. It's cool how it uses roguelike mechanics in the Pokemon battle system. The way you build your team with points and how catching Pokemon makes them available for later runs all add a lot of strategy to it. So if you're a hardcore Pokemon battling fan, or just like roguelikes and want a quick game, you could probably just load this one up on whatever you're watching this video on.
Mega Man 8-Bit Deathmatch is a crazy awesome fan project that turns Mega Man into a fast-paced, chaotic, classic-style first-person shooter. So imagine blasting enemies with the Mega Buster, Ice Slasher, and Firestorm, but it's all in this 3D style arena. It translates the 8-bit NES Mega Man style vibe into 3D really well, shockingly. While the focus is mostly on the multiplayer experience here, I found the single-player mode to be still more than enough for me. In the single-player, you're going to be fighting your way through different time periods of the classic Mega Man timeline, facing off against tons of different robot masters in bot-filled Deathmatch-style games where each chapter ends with its own distinct boss, as well as tons of other cool inclusions for hardcore Mega Man fans. Like for me, I appreciated the inclusion of Time Man and Oil Man from my favorite Mega Man game, Powered Up. It's like this what-if scenario where if Dr. Wily threw Unreal Tournament. It's really neat. So if you're a fan of Mega Man or classic arena-style shooters, this is definitely a must-play. The Legend of Zelda Dungeons of Infinity is a roguelike take on A Link to the Past. So it's a Zelda game where every run is a brand new adventure filled with random traps, monsters, and treasures. The goal is to fight your way through 12 different floors, each one having different and more dangerous threats than the last. Each time you play, the layout changes, the enemies are new and different, and the loot is unpredictable. You can open a chest and find a new sword, or you could just get a curse that screws you over for the rest of your run. It's all in the luck of the draw. You'll need to be smart with your resources and your inventory space, because if you get killed, it's back to square one. Overall, it's a love letter to the series, but with this roguelike twist, and I think any Zelda fan would be impressed by this. So I recently watched all of Ben Saint's amazing 13-hour-long Bionicle lecture, so that put me in the mood for Bionicle, and then I found Takua 64. It's a total conversion that takes Mario 64 and turns it into a Bionicle game. It's like a time machine back to the early 2000s where you get to explore the iconic island of Motunui. You play as Takua the Matoran, who's on a journey to collect all of the Toa stones that he will use to summon the legendary Toa to the island of Motunui. The game's got everything a Bionicle fan could want. Different biomes, era-appropriate Rockshi littering the island, and tons of secrets and details that are just there for the hardcore fans. All that said, while everything looks awesome and plays really smoothly, it can still be pretty tricky. As someone who's no Mario 64 expert, some of the platforming sections here are really tough, and there are no checkpoints, so if you're high up and fall down, it can get pretty frustrating. So, maybe lean on some safe states or something. But overall, if you're a Bionicle fan and love Mario 64, you should definitely look into this. It's a huge labor of love and brings a classic franchise to life in a new way, and it would make any Bionicle fan happy. Doom Infinite is a super cool fan-made game that, just like Dungeons of Infinity, takes a classic game, Doom in this case, and transforms it into a roguelike. It's currently in demo form, but it's still really impressive, and I can't wait to see what this turns into in its full release. You start each run with a random weapon and a power-up, but as you blast your way through the hordes of demons, you'll come across new weapons and abilities. It's got a great mix of old-school Doom action and modern roguelike design elements. It's fast-paced, just like Doom always was, and really challenging. If you're a fan of Doom or roguelikes, you should definitely check this one out. And I think that there's enough juice here that maybe id Software itself should look into considering doing something similar in an official capacity, maybe. This is just a great idea. Super Mario 3 Mix is a love letter to the entire Mario franchise. It's a popular fan project that takes Super Mario Bros. 3 on the NES into a new, ambitious, nostalgia-filled game. Just like Mario normally, you're going to be going through different worlds, but in this case, the different worlds you're traveling through are inspired by different Mario games, like Mario 1, Mario 2, 3, World, and even Sunshine. You even get to choose who you play as between Mario, Luigi, and even my boy Toad. It's got tons of new power-ups, enemies, and secrets. You can glide through the skies with the bunny ears, throw ice with the penguin suit, and even toss boomerangs. If you're looking for a fun, challenging, and nostalgic 2D Mario game, Super Mario 3 Mix is definitely worth checking out. Hyper Metroid is an ambitious Super Metroid conversion that reimagines it as a more open-ended map. The story setup here, though, is admittedly a bit too try-hard edgy for my taste, but it's set in an alternate universe where the space pirates kill Samus's husband and her soon-to-be-born child. So it's a little bit too dark and weird. But once you get past that, the game itself, though, is really great. The world is massive and full of secrets with tons of hidden paths and power-ups to discover. It's much more hands-off about where you need to go and how you need to get there, making it feel a lot more exploratory. The enemies are tougher, and the atmosphere is even more unsettling. So if you're a fan of Super Metroid and want a good challenge, Hyper Metroid is definitely for you. Pokemon fighting games have been tried in the past, whether it's been Pokken Tournament or their inclusion in Smash Bros. It's always felt like there's something not quite right. So here you have Pokemon Close Combat. It tries things a little bit differently, and it's really neat. It basically takes an old school Street Fighter style 2D fighting game and gives you a plethora of different fighting type Pokemon to fight as. So basically this is like Pokemon battles between trainers, but you're just controlling the Pokemon directly. Each one has their own unique moves and fighting styles, so there's actually a lot of technical depth to this. But for me, as a fighting game scrub, I just really like the details here. I mean, look at these awesome stage backgrounds and hand-drawn sprites. I really love the sketchy look that everything has. You can play solo, where you're fighting your way through this loose arcade mode, or fight online or in local multiplayer battles. This is one that is currently still being worked on, so it's not 100% complete, but I think this is already a really fun time if you're a fan of Pokemon and fighting game. Star Fox 64 Survival is a game that sounds like something that it isn't. It takes The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time and turns it into a Star Fox-themed survival game. You play as Fox McCloud, crash-landed on a mysterious planet, and you've got to survive for 30 days. And that's a pretty cool concept, but since the game is combat-focused, the Ocarina of Time combat might not be everyone's cup of tea, but regardless, you'll need to fight off monsters, scavenge for resources, and manage your health and supplies to make it through. So if you are a fan of Zelda's combat and like cool little experimental fan projects, this is definitely worth checking out. Castlevania The Holy Relics is a 2017 fan project from the creator of the awesome Metroid Rogue Dawn that I talked about in my last video. It's a completely new, awesome, polished Castlevania game. The structure here, though, takes a page out of the Mega Man book, because you can play any of the first 5 stages in any order that you want, each ending with you gaining a new relic that allows you to do new abilities for the rest of your playthrough. And then only after you beat those 5 stages, you take on the final stage. So, you know, kind of Mega Man. To add another layer on top of this, I played through the improved control version of this that gives you a bit more air control than the typical standard NES Castlevania, you know, jump and commit kind of gameplay. So with that tweak on top of this already awesome new game, it can really be put up there next to Castlevania 3 as one of, if not the best, Castlevania on the NES. So if you want a challenging but fair game that refines the classic Castlevania formula, this one's worth taking a look at. Zelda Escape from the Facility is a nice little hour-long game that's kind of like a one-shot dungeon that you might find in a bigger Zelda game. It was created for a Zelda escape room competition, and the first thing that probably stuck out to you about this is its industrial steampunk look that redresses the whole world and even Link himself. You'll be solving puzzles to gain access to new areas, but since you start empty-handed, instead of the prevalence of keys, you'll be finding more items than the typical Zelda dungeon. And those are what restrict the access from different sections of the dungeon, which make it kind of feel a lot more Metroidvania-y than the normal Zelda dungeon. There are even some new items that are made specifically for this, and it's a nice short game that if you want a quick hit of a Zelda dungeon with the exploration and stuff you'd expect, this really could just hit the spot in an hour or less. Celeste Mario's Zap and Dash mixes Celeste's platforming and dashing with
Super Mario Bros. It's the kind of fan project that is a honestly technical miracle, and it's super cool to see it pulled off on the NES within Super Mario Bros. Of all things. You can wall jump, air dash, and do even more Celeste style mechanics that I don't really want to spoil here. But on top of the amazing feat of the gameplay, the graphics here are really gorgeous, and they use the NES color palette masterfully. The structure here even calls back to Mario Odyssey, where you collect moons that are all over the world, and for me to be even able to say that, that means there is a whole environment that you can explore. So instead of the linear level-based structure of Super Mario Bros., there's actually an interconnected map that you can poke around in. It is a precision platformer, so it is tough and requires some skill and patience, but it's got a really generous checkpoint system, and even when you're like stuck and struggling in a trial and error state, it's still really fun to play, and that's like an amazing game design feat, is to make sure the game feels good even when the player is failing. Simply put, this is a must-play for Mario fans, Celeste fans, or anyone who loves a great precision platformer. Smash Remix is one of the most impressive fan projects out there. It's an incredible community-made version of Super Smash Bros. For the Nintendo 64 that adds a ton of new characters, stages, and bosses. It's still the same classic Smash 64 at its core, but with a ton of stuff that just builds on top. Most of the new stuff here even being era-appropriate to the N64, like the addition of Conqueror, Goemon, and even Marina from Mischief Makers, which is really cool to see some love for characters that never made it into Smash proper. Plus, there are a bunch of stages and characters that were backported from later Smash games, like DDD or Mewtwo. Then in addition to that stuff, there's new stages and new bosses too. If you grew up with the N64 and love classic Smash, this is right up your alley. To keep it in the realm of Nintendo crossover party games, next up is Super Mario Kart Horizons, a fan project that upgrades Super Mario Kart for the SNES. Just like Smash Remix, this is still the same kart racer at its core, but with some really good tweaks that make it a bit more palatable to modern players. There's a ton of new tracks and themes that make it a bit more interesting as well, because honestly, as someone who didn't really grow up playing the vanilla SNES Mario Kart, it kind of has always felt pretty dull to me. I know that might be sacrilege, but you know, it didn't really hit its stride till it entered 3D. But here, the mechanics are tweaked to feel a lot smoother and less archaic, but the major upgrade here is the visuals. All of the sprites have been redrawn, and it just reads better to me as a 3D environment to drive around than the original. So if you want a new Super Nintendo Mario Kart game with a really nice facelift to it, check this one out. Dr. Robotnik's Ring Racers is a fan-made kart racer built on top of Sonic Roboblast 2, which is another fan project for another time, but it has a very dedicated following for some really good reasons. It's a sprite-based kart racer that feels like a kind of Dream Saturn or Dreamcast era Mario Kart clone with Sonic, but it's got way more under the hood than that description might make it seem. It is totally packed tight with tons of unique mechanics, like the whole titular ring racing system where you collect rings to burn rings to keep your momentum going around sharp turns and up hills. But if you're like me, a newbie who's just getting your feet wet with this one, that stuff might seem a little bit intimidating, so there is luckily an accessibility feature that handles all that stuff for you, so you just can kind of play it like a normal kart racer. There's like tons of tracks and characters to unlock, and even more if you want to go down the modding rabbit hole for this one, but at that point you're so far down the mod hole, I don't even know, man. That said, there's way more than enough stuff in the base release itself, and it's just really incredibly impressive to see how much stuff they packed in here. As someone who just has barely scratched the surface here by just kind of checking this out for a few hours, I am blown away with this game. I didn't even touch the online scene with this game because I could imagine it being pretty hardcore and I didn't want to get blown out, so I just checked out the AI, and I really liked how the AI didn't have any rubber banding to it, so that's really nice. But it's also got a split-screen multiplayer option, so it could be a perfect game for a casual couch gaming session with some friends. So if you're like most people who've raced the same Mario Kart 8 tracks for years, you really should check out what these dedicated Sonic fans have cooked up. It might even raise your expectations on what you want to see out of Nintendo. Alright, and then another Sonic fan project here, and that is Sonic Triple Trouble 16-bit, and it's a game that I thought was just a simple port of the Game Gear game by the same name, but I could not have been more wrong. Sure, that is the base concept of what it is, but it might just be the best 2D Sonic game out there right next to Sonic Mania. This is a ground-up reimagining of Triple Trouble built in Game Maker with new features and new characters. The feel of a Sonic game is really the make-or-break thing that any fan could tell you, but this nails it and maybe even improves on it. The speed and ability to anticipate what's coming up is really nailed here. It feels like everything is placed in the level perfectly for you to be able to clock it coming up and act accordingly. Basically, if you're one of the many Sonic fans who is constantly begging for Sonic Mania 2 and haven't played this yet, you really should. Then we have Mega Man Rock and Roll, and it is a 2019 fan project that gives Roll her time to shine as the hero. As the story goes, Mega Man is captured and Roll has to become the new super fighting robot to rescue him. This is another fan project that just nails the feel of the series while making a bunch of tweaks along the way while building on what has come before. It's a whole new game with new robot masters, new levels, and new abilities. If Capcom kept releasing retro throwback style Mega Man games in the style of 9 and 10, I could see this fitting right in line there. So this is just like for Sonic fans wanting Mania 2, if you're begging for Mega Man 12 and you haven't played this, you're really doing yourself a disservice. TMNT Rescue-Palooza is a fan project made in Open Bore that's a massive love letter to the classic Ninja Turtles beat-em-ups. It's got 60 playable characters, yeah, 60, so Genghis Frog fans, you're not left out here. 17 stages calling back to the classic games, and even has 4-player local co-op, as any good Ninja Turtles game should. The graphics here are a mix of the different retro eras of the series that was when the series was blowing up, and there's a ton of love for the series packed in here with tons of Easter eggs. I'd say if it wasn't for Shredder's Revenge coming out recently, this really would be the definitive Turtles game. The first Rayman game gives me a ton of nostalgia. After the NES, my next console was the PS1, and Rayman was my first game for it. That said, it's pretty notorious nowadays for its difficulty, so it's no wonder why I never really got past the first few levels as a kid. But now there's Rayman Redemption, a fan-made reimagining that has a ton of new content, tweaks, and makes it not so punishing. It's built from the ground up in Game Maker, but keeps the really awesome sprite art from the original, and it just is simply the new definitive way to play this game if you're gonna come to it nowadays. Plus, there's a whole level editor, so you can get your Mario Maker on making Rayman levels now. If you're one of the dozen Rayman fans that love the original more than the 3D entries in the series, like myself, this one is something special. Legend of Princess is a short 30-minute action platformer homage to the Legend of Zelda series. It was created by the developer of Iconoclasts and it has this chaotic twist on Zelda. It's cool to see a version of this world that's from this perspective outside of Zelda 2. When you start a playthrough, you get to pick from a variety of different Zelda-inspired items that allow you to change the difficulty and playstyle to really freshen up multiple playthroughs if you go through it multiple times. It's just loaded with this unique charm, even though you're still playing as a green tunic-wearing hero who's taking down Octorok and Keese. There's even boss fights against different versions of Phantom Ganon, Dark Link, and Goma. The pixel art here, just like Iconoclasts, is really fantastic and gives this game so much character. It's definitely shorter than I would have liked, but it will still impress any Zelda fans who are looking for a unique new take on the series. Zelda Perils of Darkness is a fresh take on Zelda 1 that just really blows the original out of the water. I was genuinely shocked by how much it hooked me because the original Zelda has always been a pretty hard game for me to go back to because it can be pretty archaic at times and it often feels like a guide is required to make it through in a reasonable amount of time. But Perils of Darkness revamps it all and makes it a way more accessible and completely new game with new dungeons, regions, music, and it's really nice new art. Plus, there's multiple difficulty modes that let you tailor the challenge to your liking, and the non-linear quest design rewards you for exploring every nook and cranny. Fans of the original NES game, and even fans of the newer Zelda games like myself, would both find a ton to love about this one. Metroid Planets is a fan-made gem that takes the original NES Metroid and gives it a loving, modern update. It's basically got two games in one. A full-on remake of the original game with the needed quality-of-life tweaks like a map system, and then there's a whole new planet that feels like the NES Metroid 1.5 that we never got. It's got customizable controls, new bosses, and even co-op multiplayer. Plus there's a room designer that lets you build your own levels, kind of think Mario Maker but for Metroid. It has new 8-bit style graphics that add a few extra frames in there, and music that still feels like the original. It all subtly updates things to make it more palatable to modern players, while still feeling like a retro game. There's also a ton of other options like a planet randomizer and ways to tweak the difficulty. This is just simply the new de facto way to experience NES Metroid if you still want an 8-bit feel. Metroid Rogue Dawn is built on the bones of the original NES Metroid, but it revamps it completely into something completely new that needs to be played by every Metroid fan. Like I said before, the original Metroid has some dusty elements to it that make it pretty tough to go back to as it was, and that's why I was surprised that Metroid Rogue Dawn really won me over so much. It's an unofficial prequel where you play as a mysterious character that works under Ridley, and trust me, it pulls you in fast, and I really couldn't stop playing it. I finished it in just one 5-hour sitting, and I wasn't intending to. The visuals in New Are Here are major upgrades, and it gives the game a much darker mood. The NES color palette is really pushed to its limits to create something pretty striking and somber. If there's one Metroid fan game that deserves to be put up there with AM2R to basically become another unofficial, official part of the Metroid catalog, it's definitely Metroid Rogue Dawn. Super Junkoid is a game built on Super Metroid that transforms it so thoroughly it becomes a completely new, unrelated thing to Metroid. Well, everything here besides the audio design is new, which kind of makes the audio stick out like a sore thumb, but it still fits the melancholic vibes it's going for. The horror elements here are dialed up to the max compared to the relatively kid-friendly Metroid series, which gives it a creepy, sort of human-icky kind of atmosphere. You play as Junko, a girl who's trapped in a nightmare with a tormenting snake, though I really can't get too much into the story because honestly, I didn't really follow it very closely, but what I did get out of it was its vibes and its creative use of Super Metroid's mechanics. The sprite work here is really detailed and amazing, and I really just love to see how much work went into this. If you're into anime-style horror and love the feel of Super Metroid, this one's definitely worth checking out. If you're like me, you caught the Castlevania bug during the Igavania era of the series, that being the Metroidvania search action reinvention that debuted with Symphony of the Night. I've since gone back and played the more linear classics of the series, and while they're great on their own, they're definitely not quite the same thing. But then we have here the relatively recently released Castlevania Revamped. It's a merging of those eras into a really amazingly fleshed out, polished reimagining of Castlevania 1 that's structured like a Metroidvania. One of the complaints that's often lobbed at the NES classics is just how stiff they feel, and here they focus more on evoking the emotional feelings of playing those games rather than the actual feelings of the controls, so this is just a really well-feeling game to play. This is one of the games in this video that if the parent company, Konami in this case, were smart, they would work out some sort of deal and bring this under a more official banner, because this is a really polished, amazing game. Alright, and then we have another classic NES-style Castlevania from a new perspective, this time that being more literal because it's a first-person game built in GZ Doom called Castlevania Simon's Destiny. This game feels and looks a lot like a boomer shooter because it's built on the bones of boomer shooters. If you've always wanted a solid 3D Castlevania experience, but still want it to be relatively still era appropriate with its vibes, this is super cool. The thing that really stands out here to me is the actual feel of the whip. I'd imagine getting the feeling of a limited range weapon like a whip right in first person could have been pretty difficult. And it really just feels perfect here. Anyway, this one is awesome for any fans who are looking for a cool new way to experience the gothic castle that we've only really seen pulled off well in 2D. Next up is Silver Knight Crusaders, which is a arcade-style Castlevania fan game that creates its own characters and lore while still being very evocative of the series, even using some of its assets. If you want a game that hews closer to Rondo of Blood rather than Symphony of the Night, this is what you're looking for. It's built in Open Bore, which is an engine that a lot of fan-made 2D beat-em-up projects are made in, and that gives this game a much snappier, combo-y feel than the official classic-style Castlevanias. One tip if this one interests you though, make sure you enable the cheats that give you unlimited credits if you want to make your way through this one casually. Mega Man Maker, previously called Mega Maker, is what you think it is. It's basically Mega Man Mario Maker. As someone who loved the stage builder in Mega Man Powered Up on the PSP, this one is one of the coolest fan projects out there. It's constantly getting updated and worked on to add new bosses, mechanics, and it's quickly becoming a all-encompassing sandbox for making an 8-bit Mega Man stage of your dreams. As you can imagine, it's really cool to see what the community builds and how they create new ideas using the massive history of Robot Master abilities that are constantly being added. If you're curious if your favorite Robot Master or weapon are in the game yet, they have a really well curated wiki over on their site. As the only unfinished project in this video, I really hope that this gets to a point that they are really happy with it because it's really incredible. If there's one series that has the most unofficial games, it has to be the Mario series. And there are a ton that I could talk about, but the one that I really connected with the most was Super Mario Ultimate. It's built on Mario 3, my favorite Mario game, and it maintains the amazing feel while overhauling everything into a whole new game with new levels and new graphics. If there's one thing that really scares me off of a ton of unofficial games, it's usually the extreme difficulty that's present in a ton of them. They expect you to be an expert. But this is one of the few games in this video that have difficulty options that allow you to really tailor things to how you want to play. There's just really a ton of imaginative choices here that really impressed me, and I think that if you've played all the way through Mario 3 100 times like me, you definitely need to check this one out. Alright, and now we are on the final unofficial game that I want to shout out here, and it's an odd one. It's Deadpool for the NES. As a huge fan of NES Ninja Gaiden, this one is just a huge treat because this game is built on the bones of it. And that was really the perfect choice for Deadpool. The revolutionary cutscenes of the era are the perfect place for Deadpool to make his fourth wall breaking jokes, and Ryo Hayabusa's ability set really just does match perfectly with Deadpool. This is a complete overhaul of Ninja Gaiden with reskinned stages and enemies, and even Deadpool's iconic healing factor that makes this game a lot more approachable than proper NES Ninja Gaiden. There's just a ton of fun Easter eggs here to comics and retro video games, which just fit with Deadpool's whole thing. So if you're a fan of The Merc with a Mouth, or just want a really great NES Ninja Gaiden fan project, definitely look this one up. Alright, and those were all of the fan projects that I have covered so far. Recommend me more too, because I'm running out. I really want to discover more games that have been made by fans. It's one of my favorite things to check out, see how much passion and love gets poured into some of these games without much of a monetary incentive to do so. It's really inspiring in that way. But yeah, this was a compilation of all of my videos really so far in this series, so sorry about some of the inconsistent style and audio, but time changes and you change how you make a video over time, so that's kind of how that happened there. I know it might be weird that I played some of them backwards, so what I did is I put them in reverse release order, and that's because, I put the least viewed to most viewed videos, so the most people can watch the most of the video of it makes sense in my convoluted mind. Yeah, if you like this video, make sure you check out my other stuff. I do Steam games as well, I do retro games. Check out my other videos. I think you'd probably like them if you like discovering new, weird, kind of more underground kind of stuff. But yeah, if you like this video, do all the YouTube-y stuff, subscribe, share, do all that stuff. It's really genuinely super, super appreciated. And thank you for watching.